Hey everybody, it is Joe Maklinski from Shift. Welcome to our webinar today. We're going to be getting started in just a couple minutes. It's not enough time to take a restroom break. You probably finish up your favorite song, but the party will get started in just a minute or two as everybody's coming in here. As you're jumping into today's webinar, just to kind of get us rolling here a little bit with a little bit of activity, given the digital world that we live in, go ahead and put in the chat where you're going to take your next vacation. Put in the chat where you are going to take your next vacation. I need some good ideas here. I love it. All right. Outer Banks, a little Tulum, a little Tennessee, Sicily. Bob was kidding when he said Baltimore. He's got to be. He lives in Baltimore, but who knows? All right. All right, everyone. Well, again, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Joe Maklinski from Shift. We are all very excited that you have decided to join us today for this next training webinar. For those who know us, you know that we've been up to this thing now for the 20th year this year of putting on workshops and trainings and webinars to try to be of service and support to the community. I believe today's topic is a bit special though. I've had this feeling several times over the last 20 years. This time last year in February, in fact, I remember putting on a webinar talking about this whole pandemic right before it got cooking. I was actually on the phone yesterday with a gentleman who was on that webinar. He was part of this group that I'm affiliated with called Baby Bathwater. And I remember, you know, his comment yesterday to me was, you know, look, I really appreciate that you guys continue to be of service and support, that you're putting out what you and your team are seeing and hearing and feeling. And one of the messages that he remembered from last year was this whole notion of, you know, it's not just about, you know, having a positive mindset during a crisis. It's not just, you know, about the idea that things are changing faster than we can keep up with. But he remembered a line I said that, you know, this is a moment to double down on humanity. It really is. You know, this is like last year, you know, we didn't know what we didn't know about the pandemic. And I would offer this exact moment about hybrid work is exactly that same moment, that we really don't know what we don't know. And given the specialness of this conversation today, I just want to say thank you for joining us. A big shout out to our team who has helped put this on today, our marketing team, but also our team of consultants who has literally been doing nothing but curating and connecting some really amazing content about what are the new practices of the way that we can work. And I think just before we start, I'd like to, you know, start off with this notion that we should all be acknowledging each other, that, you know, it has been a long 15 months, that over the last 15 months, everyone's lives has changed drastically, that this has been no shortage of remarkable and hard and heavy moments. One of the things that we see as leaders can lean into this moment with their team is just to acknowledge it, is just to not have your head in the sand thinking that this whole notion of talking about getting back to work, we're going to talk about why that could be the single biggest failure of leadership right now, because it implies this notion that you haven't been working, right? It's one of my mentors and friends likes to talk about the word giving back. That phrase tends to imply you took something. And I think words really matter here. So if you're on today's call, you're one of our fans, followers, subscribers, one of our clients, one of our old supporters or ambassadors, or you're also the type of leader who gives a damn about your people. You believe that people are your most important asset. So for a second, one of the things that you're going to notice in today's workshop that we've curated and designed for you, which is, this is a little bit of a mirror session. This is not just me speaking with you and to you, it's also me speaking to myself and to our team at Shift. And so when you hear us ask you to think about something or take on an exercise, every one of these little tactics, every one of these little questions or prompts can be used with your team. So in this moment, if you had to acknowledge yourself for some of your greatness, like I just started today with the fact that we've been early for 20 years. We've talked about mindset and emotional intelligence before anyone else did, really, in the early 2000s. We got on the train of employees are your most important asset back around 2008, 9, and 10. We started talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the mid 2015 timeframe. Last year, we were really leaning hard into that this was going to change the way we live, work, and really everything in the beginning of the year. So in this moment, acknowledge yourself. Acknowledge yourself for all the things that you've gone through over the last 15 months. Maybe just say a word in the chat that makes you, I don't know, give yourself permission to feel good. You know, you're here. And not only are you here, but you're here to get some hopeful insight for how you can be a better leader and how we can change the way we work so it changes the way we live. So again, throw in the chat something you'd like to acknowledge yourself for. And if you do not play along, our team will be kicking you out of the webinar today because there's nothing worse than someone who is just standing in the stands and not participating or playing along. So thank you for that. So today we're going to be talking about hybrid work, heaven or hell. I got inspired by this concept because I've been reading and listening to all these pundits and the experts talk about that this is, oh, it's just hybrid work, right? It's just going to take what we did pre-pandemic, what we did during the pandemic, and we're going to kind of put the two together, right? We're going to find that healthy compromise. But what we keep saying leaders really do is mess this up royally. That again, they're not seeing that this is potentially the single greatest revolution to the workplace, that this is really an opportunity not to waste. So when you think about hybrid work, let's create a little bit of a base reality today. Go ahead and throw in the chat. When you think about what hybrid work is to either you or your organization, throw it in the chat. Thank you, Dan. Good to see you again. Flexibility, scary. Combo of working remote. Love that, Shannon. Necessary. Greg is already starting to think about time. How many days a week we're going to be in the office. Love that. So one of the things you're going to hear us say a lot today that you have an opportunity to do with your team, you can see it in the chat. This is a really big moment for organizations to co-create the future together. This is an opportunity for people to have their voices heard. If you've not seen recently, the Washington Post, the CEO of this media group just demanded, threatened the jobs of its employees if they did not come back to work. And how do you think that's going to go for her in a talent shortage that we find ourselves in? We're going to talk about some of these things and some of these, what we see as blunders being done by executive leaders who, you know, whether they have their head in the sand or they just don't get the software update that they need to really start thinking about what this really looks like. So why hybrid work won't work. This is a little bit of tongue in cheek here. We needed something to get you here from a marketing standpoint. So we figured we'd talk about all the problems and all the trap doors and all the booby traps, if you will, around what are some of the problems. We, of course, are going to give you some remedies and some things that we think from a practice standpoint will help. But if you just wanted to kind of bottom line up front, why isn't this going to work? We've got a small list here, everything from leaders are really not in touch for a variety of reasons, but we're going to give you some good data that you can take back to your organization to sort of think about this differently. Number two, we're going to talk a lot about that this is unknown terrain, meaning we have never done this before. I can't wait to share with you a story. It has nothing to do with work. It has everything to do with being a parent, about how none of us really know what we're doing. Number three, leaders are not equipped to handle health and wellness. When I think about this, this is, again, something we've been leading into for the last 2 decades about how do you see the whole employee and really be supportive to create that psychological safety. Number four, number four, this to me is the show stopper. It's not fair or equitable. We have been doing human beings research around what makes an environment fair and equitable. And we've just had 165,000 women leave the workforce. We're going to talk about not only that dynamic, but really what does create this favoritism that we have as human beings around who we see and who we don't see, and what would be some of the problems with a hybrid model. And then finally, blurred lines everywhere. This is specifically talking about all the things that you can imagine around politics and how we used to think, you can't talk about politics at the workplace. And there's been some recent happenings, if you will, in organizations. They're just trying to navigate this time the best they can, but also, again, maybe not doing it as strategically or intentionally or thoughtfully as they can. So here are the problems. We're going to talk about some of the problems. We're going to talk about some of the data and then some of the practices. First things first, leaders are not in touch. If we could give one pill to every organization we've worked with for the last 20 years, 600 plus organizations that we've been helping to support changing the way people work, again, so that they can change the way they live, it would be the pill of self-awareness. It would be the pill of perspective. It would be the pill of, how often do we ascend to a position of leadership? How often do we kind of become a little distant from where we came from? And how quickly do we forget? Andrew, my partner at Shift, and I were on the phone with a CEO yesterday of a very big company. And he was explaining about his perspective is very different than his team's perspective. Like, he didn't see some of the same things. And one of the things that I loved Andrew did is he talked about that there was a study that, the second that you're out of a particular position in an organization for just 6 months, you completely lose your perspective on what it's like to sit in that chair. Because two things: one, your world changes because you're in a different position, but two, their world is changing because the world is changing pretty quick. And I will also say very quickly here, when you think about the word bias, bias is really about a blind spot. It's an unintended blind spot. And I often reference Amos Tversky and Danny Kahneman's work that they received the Nobel Peace Prize back in 2001. They were one of the first researchers to talk about this idea that our brains are not logical. We do not think rationally. In fact, we think a lot of irrational thoughts most of the day. And the book Thinking Fast and Slow really set the table for this conversation. And one of the biases that I talk a lot about is the availability bias, this notion that there are things which I know you've heard, there are things you don't know, but there are also things you don't know. And that really is setting up sort of this stage of like, where are we with hybrid work? Now, why aren't leaders in touch? Well, because you heard me say earlier today, they talk about this notion of getting back to work. Like, getting back to work again, it implies that you weren't working this entire time. Now, look, maybe you have a few employees that you're questioning whether they've been working or not. Different story. But from a data perspective, Microsoft works with more than 1 million businesses, and they've been publishing some really interesting data that I had not seen up until last week. I'll start from my right to left. Documents created. There have been 66% more documents created before the pandemic versus during the pandemic. Like, the idea that we're not actually producing more work is hogwash. Team chats obviously has gone up because we're not going to the office. Email has gone up tremendously by about 40%. And meetings have both doubled in time and doubled in quantity. And this is like real data. And if you hone in on sort of the little line here towards the right side, it says holiday season. The holidays bring in a much needed break in activity, but do you see that happening? Not really. And when you think about Zoom fatigue, when you think about the whole pandemic fatigue, this is a real thing. And, in addition to being a real thing, if some of us remember what the labor market was like in the late 90s or pre the financial recession in 2007 and 8, do you remember how hard it was to hire really amazing people? Do you remember how many job openings you had? Do you remember that it took upwards of 60, 70, and 80 days to find a placement for that particular role? I remember because we had a recruiting firm and it was true. But more than that, this statistic right here, 41% of employees are considering leaving their current employer because at the end of the day, the genie has been let out of the bottle. Every organization that would have put up a fight with us over the last 20 years about, well, we can't let our team telecommute, we don't trust them to get the work done. Well, we've just proven to ourselves that, like, on the drop of a dime, we went from a pre-pandemic world that was all over the place in terms of the rules and the guidelines to a during the pandemic where most of us, if you were lucky enough to work from home, not everyone had that opportunity, but most of us did. So you were living this sort of very strange existence where I'm coming to you from my home office. I'm still in sweatpants, pants without buttons has been my famous line here for the last 15 months, which I'm pretty damn excited about. I've been hanging out with my dog the whole time. We're all in each other's homes. And people are starting to ask big questions like who says we got to do it this way? Like who says work has got to suck? Who says I got to work 5 days a week? Who says I got to work 9 to 5? This notion of really power imbalance that existed in the labor market for so long, it's about to be decoupled. More importantly, 70% of companies right now are actually reporting a talent shortage, and we're just on the front end of this equation. So what does it look like to be out of touch? Well, I figured I'd give you a quick example here. Here are two quick anecdotes. We have Stacey Brown Philpott, the CEO of TaskRabbit. She said the future of work is really about deciding how to live, how to work, or I should say that again. The future of work is really about people deciding how to live and work in the way that they want. Interesting notion, seems fairly down the fairway of like what you would say. And then you have this guy who's the CEO of Goldman Sachs. This guy says there won't be any, we argue that there won't be any new normal. His organization, that remote work is an aberration. Does anybody notice the difference between these two? I mean, besides the obvious that one looks like me. We're actually talking about the difference between an old world and a new world. That Goldman Sachs, can't argue. Yes, they're a pretty amazing organization in some respects. Their DE&I efforts have been applaudable. However, Wall Street has had a stranglehold on the labor market for how long? How many people here went to school with people who wanted to be on Wall Street? Like it was the allure of making all the money, of being kind of in this elite class of society. Well, the world is changing. And again, did you get the software update? So this saga, this tug of war that we've been doing with each other for so long is just getting started yet again. So what's the practice here? The practice not to be out of touch is what we call deep heart listening. And this needs really not a big explanation because you know what this means. If you're a parent, this is getting down on the level with your children and it's listening to them. It's listening to them with an open mind and an open heart, and it's being side by side with them. It's being curious. It's not having all the answers. It's not trying to fix things. It's just accepting and allowing and acknowledging. It's why I open up today with like, acknowledge yourself for what are the things that you would like to, again, sort of give yourself credit for, or also give others credit for. In our recent all hands meeting at Shift, I got this idea from a company called Gaping Void. I mean, I don't know if you are like us, we are like done with Zoom meetings. I know there's some irony given that we're doing a Zoom meeting here with you right now. But we wanted to change up the energy. Like when we used to do meetings in person, when we gathered, we were really big on what are the ways in which to change the energetics of the room. So we had everybody, after recognizing them and acknowledging them for something they did, the gifts they brought, the contributions they made, we had them kind of run down the hall, if you will, and go download their favorite saying from this particular website. And then everyone talked, even though the picture here doesn't necessarily describe that moment of like the brightness of everyone's face. There was an exercise being done here and everybody was actually, this is their thinking faces. But everybody reported back that like just the small thing of changing the environment can make a big difference, back to the idea of deep heart listening. And the last thing I'll say here really quickly is, if you're not literally doing everything you can to do walk and talks with your team on the old school phone, or the idea of giving your team to have some space to just vent and be heard, and then talking about the idea of re-entry interviews, all of your teammates have experienced things in the last 15 months that you know nothing about. And there's this idea of an exit interview, which is after you've decided to leave, you actually interview and then everybody gets really honest. Adam Grant and Esther Perel have been talking about this re-entry interview, which is like, well, how about we just talk to people now about the things that are most important to them? And again, with a really deep sense of listening. Number 2, this is unknown terrain. So after I get through the first piece of this, if you just want to throw in the chat, maybe something that you agreed with, you didn't agree with, or a question that you have, our team is going to be standing by just to kind of grab some of the comments and the questions and can be actively helping you. We've got about a dozen or so folks from Shift that are here just to participate and play. So as we talk through this today, feel free to drop some questions in there. So number 2, this is unknown terrain. I've talked a little bit about this. We've never been here before. The story I was going to share with you, I guess I will, not was, is I remember my daughter was about 7 or 8 years old. Her name is Ellie. She's a little bit of an old soul. She's jammed me up a bunch of times as a parent, you know, the whole Santa Claus thing. She got me really good on that one because I've kind of made this notion I'm not going to lie to her. She asked me something one time and I looked at her and I said, look, I don't know. And she's like, what do you mean you don't know the answer to this question? And I said, Ellie, we don't have a rule book for this. Like, there's not like a guideline of how to be a parent. I've never raised a daughter before. I've never raised kids before. Mom and I are literally making this up as we go along. And she like stopped and she froze and she like looked at me. She's like, holy shit. Like, he's telling me the truth. Like, dad doesn't know what he's doing. And that's right. None of us do. We're literally making this up moment by moment. If we're being honest in business, it's entirely true too, that we're making this up moment by moment. Having the humility to acknowledge that, we believe, is big. So because it's unknown, we need to unravel all of the assumptions. Like, who says we need to work at a certain place? Who says we need to work at a certain time? How we work really should be mapped to extreme flexibility. Harvard Business Review did a great little 2x2 graph here of talking about the difference between the time and the place and where we started and where we may go. But again, where we work is going to be basically up to, we can see the employees. And frankly, the gas shortage right now just kind of doubles down on the fact that, you know, maybe it's the universe kind of winking at us, telling us to get back into the homes and stop doing these long commutes each way that were 52 minutes in some of the cities across this country. Like, again, not super helpful. Why we work. I will star this as many times as I can. Dan Pink wrote a great book called Drive. Talked about the fundamental way to get the discretionary effort and to help people become more engaged is mastery, autonomy, and purpose. This is not just for the millennials or Generation Z. We are all called, if not any other time, but now during a pandemic, to start asking questions of like, why are we doing this? Like, what am I doing all of this for? Why am I giving my life energy to something that I may not care about? Again, a big deal. And who is working? Again, we go back to this sort of tug of war between all these different generations. It's going to be tough to map and to think out. I love this quote at the bottom: before the truth sets you free, it tends to make you miserable. And if it's not making you miserable right now, I would say dig a little deeper and go a little further. Now, I also think if you're listening to this, you're an OD, HR, you're an executive leader, and you're trying to think about like, well, where do we come from? I talk about this book all the time. I remember coming up in this space, in the management consulting space, the book, The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge was like, you had to read it. If you didn't read it, you didn't know what you were doing. Well, I would argue that book is completely outdated. And this book here by Frederick Laloux, he was an ex-McKinsey consultant, reinventing organizations. If you've read it, great, read it again. Because this tracks and maps where society and human consciousness and development goes to and how that should be mirrored in business. And he's really done an amazing job of sort of mapping out where are we going. And I think this quote, you know, there are decades where nothing happens and then weeks where decades happen. I think this is, again, a very appropriate sort of tone setter for where we are. So hybrid work is clearly the way we're going. And you'll see this a little bit later, which is, you know, there seems to be a little tug of war between employees want to come in less than 3 days and employers want people to come in more than 3 days. And again, we're sort of just debating and negotiating on, you know, time, but not necessarily place. I will just tell you again, the genie's been let out of the bottle. This is, I remember the movie Shawshank Redemption at the end, when Morgan Freeman, after spending 40 plus years in jail, is working at the grocery store and he raises a hand to go to the bathroom. The guy's like, why do you keep asking me to go to the bathroom? And the guy goes, because this is how I've been doing it for 40 some years. Well, I got to tell you, people are going to stop asking for permission. They're going to stop asking for the basic human desire to be free and to have choice. It's what this country was founded on. So I would make it a core component as you're designing your hybrid model. Now, there's a bunch of different models to follow. Some, like Goldman, are saying, we'll let you work remotely occasionally. You've got people that are saying, we'll do the remote thing only, like GitHub and Automate It. These are companies that have been doing this for a long time. I would ask at some point today if the Shift team can just put up some of these examples in the chat so that you can click and actually get to, these companies are publishing. Microsoft put out their entire hybrid work philosophy. It's kind of amazing. I'm going to show you a sort of a slide here in a second. Or, you know, this hybrid model, which again, like, are we doing all remote or are we doing some remote, and what would be the rules of the game? Microsoft, again, calling them out. I think I've got a really good perspective on not looking at this as binary. We're either remote or not, office or not. They're looking at this as a progression. So think about it. Stage one, we were all closed, work from home. Stage three, we were strongly encouraged to work from home, but if you had to come into the office, it might be good. Right now, shift is actually right there. We've had some office interactions, but for the most part, we're asking everyone to stay home, not be on a plane. It's the first time in 20 years I haven't actually been on a plane, which is kind of cool. But you can sort of see the way they're thinking about this, which is keeping some freedom and flexibility based on time. But just like we've been telling organizations for a long time, some of you have worked with us that are sitting on this webinar today. You would hear me say things like, does your organization know what's most important? Do you have a vision? Do you have a strategy? Do you have a growth plan? Do you have an aim, a North Star? Do people know, own, and drive it? Do people have a sense of connection to it? Can they make decisions on a daily basis to get there? Well, guess what? You're going to need that same thing for a post-pandemic work strategy. So look, McKinsey, I don't do this often, but they happen to be a friendly competitor as it relates to a big brother here in the industry. They have come out with some good data here. Most organizations have not clearly communicated a vision for what this means. I'm going to talk to you at the end of today's training webinar that we can help you do that, and that's less of a sales pitch and it's more of, we'll explain to you how that might look. But this starts with, as I mentioned in the very beginning, listening, listening, listening. And if organizations can do a really good job right now of communicating the things that we all agree to, potentially good things happen. Now, again, you actually don't have to start from scratch. There are a lot of organizations, and we've been talking about HubSpot and Dropbox and Twitter and even Spotify have gotten some really good things that they've literally published online. So if your head of HR hasn't seen these yet, or if you're the head of HR and you haven't seen these yet, I would really strongly encourage you just to understand the terrain. Now, look, you can't copy and paste someone else's plan. This is not a one-size-fits-all moment. This is actually a time for you to co-create with your team what's going to make the most sense. And back to like who's nailing it and who's failing it, look, Google has been heralded as one of the most progressive organizations from an employee perspective, and they are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. We've had an opportunity actually to partner with a few folks that have worked there before and currently, frankly, and you can see they're back to that 3-day hill. More than 3 days or less than 3 days. Microsoft, again, we talked a little bit about. Ford is even getting into the game. And then again, what do you notice about this slide? Who's failing it? Who's having a hard time getting the software update that they don't have all the power anymore? People are going to vote with their feet. Look, I agree that being in person is still great and meaningful and necessary at times. But last time I checked, we are not through this pandemic yet. There are a lot of people that you're going to see here in the next few slides that are still struggling mightily with their own safety concerns, their own vaccine concerns. They're not sure what the CDC is saying. We've all been kind of radicalized depending on what media outlet that you're watching and you're listening to. These are strange times, folks. So from a practice standpoint on this one, as it relates to being new terrain, look, I wrote a book back in 2018 called Shift the Work. Again, I think a hair early to talk about the idea of really engaging people's whole self, the whole biology, the brain in their head, which is really the priority base to things that are most important. So asking your team on a consistent basis, what are the most important things you're working on? Help them help you see what they're trying to aim for. Number two, passion in the heart. Every organization I meet, almost to a T, asks the same question, which is, how do I get my team to have more ownership? To feel like it's theirs, to take more risk, or to take more steps along that line. And we say it all the time, which is like, why are they doing this? We talk about the 25 reasons why in this book, and it really is a way to activate some of this passion. If you've done this exercise because you're hanging out with us right now, I will encourage you to keep doing this exercise. It's an exercise that is an oldie but a goodie. And then last is purpose. I've said this a few times already, which is, what is this adding up to? Like, how can you empower your people for this extreme flexibility, and ask them a simple question of what would make today worth it? And I think one of the things that's important is, if the first piece is not being out of touch and being a little aware of oneself, the second piece here is having a little humility. We do not have all the answers at Shift. In fact, we have more questions than we have answers. I've said that a lot. We're co-creating this like legitimately with you and with our clients and with our team. We may get another month in and figure out that maybe a couple of things we've said here need an update. The idea of adjusting our beliefs is a great idea. Adam Grant, his last book, talked about rethinking things again. And I think as a species, we got to get good with the software updates. Things are moving a little faster than sometimes we can keep up. So think about engaging all three brains and really thinking about the idea of I don't know. Number 3, leaders are not equipped to handle health and wellness. Oh, namaste. Who's ready for the yoga portion of today's meeting? I can see it, Jonathan. You look excited about the yoga portion part of this meeting. So leaders are not equipped to handle health and wellness. Look, I went to Johns Hopkins. I did for about a second want to be a doctor. I showed up at organic chemistry and realized that was not going to happen, okay? For the last 20 years, I've practiced longevity to the best of my ability and trying to figure out, what does it really mean to live a full day and a full life? But I'll tell you, this is a moment. This is not a time to draw a neat box, a convenient compartment around someone's health and well-being. And it used to be a competitive advantage to be, collaborative with your team, to be co-creative with your team, and to have the back of your team. I'm telling you, this is no longer going to be a competitive advantage. This will be a norm over the next several years. So the question is, well, what does that look like? Look, there's the pandemic protocol. I couldn't tell you what the CDC said today. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. There's vaccine mandates or not mandates. I could just stop the webinar right here. I could open up the screen. We could have the most vicious debate on vaccine mandates. That in one of the most freest countries on the planet, that the best thing that we can think about in terms of reaching herd immunity is a mandate. And we're like, I've actually heard several organizations right now mandating it. I've heard of employees having a really hard time with it. We've heard about lawsuits potentially. I don't have a good answer for you here other than to say, good luck and Godspeed to all of us, because we're going to have to work this out one way or the other. And we are one way or the other in this together because it happens to be a pandemic that is contagious. So I don't know. I can see the cases on both sides. Mental health, well-being. These are all really important. Again, the last CDC mask chart, it's confusing to me. I'm still having a problem when I should wear a mask and when I shouldn't. We recently met at the office and we were trying to decide, is it 3 feet or 6 feet? Like, this is still a thing. COVID vaccines, people who do not want to get them, again, I can hold space that I understand that. I can also hold space that if you're someone who has a compromised immune system or you live with someone with a compromised immune system, this is still a very scary time to live. And I know for a fact, regardless of where you sit on the spectrum, nobody in the world wants to give someone COVID and have them, not be okay. But what's the answer? I don't know. How's that for modesty and humility? Like, I don't think any of us do, but I think we can acknowledge it. And I think we can acknowledge that the byproduct of this is a mental health crisis unlike no other. Now, COVID has been called the great accelerator, right? The CEO of Microsoft said that we got 5 years of digital transformation in 2 months. That's his famous line, that everything has been quickening, so to speak, as a good friend of mine, Leggett, says. I think it's been a little something different. I think it's been the great revealer. I think all we've been doing is covering back all the hidden authorities, hidden agendas, hidden assumptions that we just got inherited. I mean, I'm working on this book right now called Who Says. This whole idea is, why don't we ask, why are we doing this way? There's an old parable about a family that, used to make bread in a square pan. And I'm going to totally butcher this example, but the kid asked the mom, why do we do it this way? Why don't we put it all in? And the mom's like, well, I don't know. My grandmother did it that way. So that they went to the grandmother and said, why do we do it this way? And the grandmother said, well, because it was always done that way. We should ask great-grandmom. And great-grandmom, guess what she said? The exact same thing. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Mental health is going to be a big thing. 100 years ago, there were no physical health standards in this country. Remember the old guys with like those weird leopard underwear on with the big squirrely mustache and that was like, the beginning days of Jack LaLanne, of all these health guys that sort of made physical standards We all get it. We should walk. We should exercise. Well, guess what? Mental health, kind of a big deal. And I don't think used to say this a lot in my early days. It's like, how many of us went to class or college and majored in psychology or communication or sociology or in science to understand the brain? Not a lot of us. Well, guess what? Now we're piling on mental health. And why I say we're not equipped is because a lot of us are, you can see this, a lot of us feel that we'd have nowhere to turn. A lot of us are scared about our jobs and our businesses. 100,000 businesses have closed. More than 500,000 people have died during this crisis. I get that there's some bright spots for sure, but to make the mistake that people have literally been crying their way to work, right? Remember that old line from Tom Hanks, there is no crying in baseball? Well, again, another BS moment. There is crying. There's a lot of it. People are having a hard time with this. And most of the older ways to work would say, no, don't bring that crap into my office anymore. And it's like, look, I'm not saying you got to be a therapist. I didn't say get out your couch and have people sit there, but to acknowledge that this is true is a super important moment. And I'll double down on this for a minute. And the doubling down is that we are human beings and we do not like change. We do not like uncertainty. We definitely don't like impermanence. When astronauts go into space, right, they call it the great perspective. When they look back on the Earth and they see the fragility of this pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan said, in the midst of this black void, we are hurling through the universe on a rock. We have no effing idea what the hell's going on. I mean, the best that we can do in this very limited time that we spend here is to create a reality, a base paradigm of how we think we're going to make it through without freaking the hell out every single day. Well, and I know we've heard this thing PTSD. We usually associate it with child abuse or people who have been to war or people who've gone through violent moments. And the American Psychological Association and many other groups have now done research to say, you know what, PTSD is actually, a lot of us probably have a lot more of it than we think pre-pandemic. During the pandemic, when the whole world fell apart, when you are waiting in gas lines 15 months later today, when you're worried about your loved ones and you haven't seen your friends and family, when you've been isolated from the world, PTSD is a big deal right now. Your organization has trauma. Your people have trauma. So I'm not suggesting you should be a health expert and figure this all out by yourself, but I do think you can answer a few questions, that you can find a way to turn some of this PTSD into what they call PTSG, post-traumatic growth. This is the proverbial turning lemons into lemonade. This is how do you find the good in the bad? How do you take your hardest moment and say, great, here's the agenda, by the way, for your next meeting with your leaders or your team. Ask them, during COVID, what's been your greatest loss? What's your greatest gain you've experienced? This is a pretty bit of a hot topic. When I've asked this question, even with our team, people have gotten a little crunchy, rightfully so. They're like, how can you find a gain in this? It's hard. It's hard. It's not easy. What are you learning about yourself? What would it look like if you applied some of these learnings going forward? And finally, what are the one or two phrases that you could remind yourself about, how you're learning? So, we're going to run out a little bit of time today. We were thinking about doing a breakout session, but I'll just ask you to play with me, which is in the chat, go ahead and put in, what has been the greatest gain for COVID in you? Like, I've got a little bit of a weird relationship with COVID. I do know people who have passed. I moved out of Baltimore, which is sort of the first time I've said that publicly. So for those who don't know, we moved down to Vienna, Virginia, and are loving life. I've had this amazing time with family and friends. I had no idea how hard I worked before. I had none. I was a maniac. And I'm sorry for some of you if you had to put up with my mania for the last, 20 years. But to really kind of connect to what has been your greatest gain, I think is one way to help people through this experience. And frankly, the practice here quickly is to prioritize fundamental well-being, which is really 4 components. It's your emotional, your physical, your mental, and your spiritual being. And I know you didn't sign up for this. I know if I looked at your job description as a leader or an executive in your organization, you're like, Hogla, this is not the stuff I want to talk about. I want to talk about the performance, the productivity, the profit, the growth, the CAGR, the CAC, all the cool, acronyms that we have in business. And I'm going to tell you that people want to talk about this. They want to talk about how emotionally are we grateful for this moment? Are you giving your people, like one of our clients just gave their whole entire company a comfort day? which is kind of cool. Publicly traded company. Physical exercise, getting out and about. We've all been, again, sort of confined to a very weird existence, encouraging our people to do this. We had a functional medicine doctor come in to talk to the team at Shift and started to talk to them about, supplements. Like I never thought we would have a functional medicine doc talking to a small management consulting firm about supplements. Mental. This one is almost exclusively rooted in your sleep. And I will just tell you, it's something I still am trying to crack and hack and figure how I crack that code. But, if your team is not sleeping upwards of 6 to 7 to 8 hours, there's a problem. They're going to get brain fog. They're not going to know it. They're going to be sitting in a tornado and they're going to have to figure it out. And I know some of you personally, by the way, and I know some of your sleep sucks. Let's just be honest. Call it what it is, B, right? And so we got to figure this piece out. Spiritually, meditation, we've been doing a lot of that at Shift and helping people through, like just breathing, right? This is the role of a leader. Frankly, this is the opportunity of a leader moving forward. Now, got 2 more here. It's not fair. I told you this is one of my favorite ones because there's been a lot of studies here, specifically one back in 2015. I'm going to forget this guy's name and I didn't want to. But he did a study that basically proves that, we have a bias. Guess what? If you don't see people, you have a hard time recognizing their gifts. Like how many of us lost sleep last night due to what's going on in the Middle East last night? Maybe some of us. How about what's going on in Darfur? How about what's going on in Somalia? How about what's going on in India right now? How about what's going on? We as human beings have a hard time creating an expanded circle of concern unless we are literally within proximity. There's a lot of books that are talking about we as human beings have been local and linear, and we've been now living through this time in history for the first time ever in 300,000+ years that we've been walking on the face of the planet. We're now thinking exponentially, right? Which is not something our brain naturally does. We don't think exponentially well. So when we say it's not fair, my first thought or share is this. Adam Grant, I love this little cartoon here. Write down the number, 165,000 women have left the workforce. I want you to let that sink in. 165,000 women have left the workforce. In January and April, the jobs that were created mostly went to men. Why is this? Well, one of the problems with hybrid work is that research indicates that it's difficult to treat employees equally when some are working at home and others aren't. And we're still dealing with a patriarchy. We're still dealing with, the fact that most of what we see around us was created by, the gender that I am. And look, I'm not down here trying to shame or talk down to anyone, but let's just call it what it is. Like, this is a moment for us to really embrace all of us. This is a moment to really get down to brass tacks that it's not fair. It's not. And it's not just fair to women. It's not fair to a lot of other parts of the population. People with disabilities have been mightily challenged during this environment. So what else? Business leaders are faring far better than their employees. Like this whole idea, every time I see a CEO on Squawk Box or one of these cable news channels talking about how amazing things are in their organization or what their plans are for their post-pandemic work strategy, look at the data. Business leaders are 61% saying things are going pretty well and only 39% are struggling. But go all the way down here between single parents, new employees, frontline workers. I mean, stop the music now. Essential workers, my ass. If they were so essential, we'd stop paying them 10, 12, 15 bucks an hour. Like, we got to start reconciling the words and the meaning and how we want to think about this. And I get it. We all got options and choices, but some of us don't have the same options and choices. And as you think about this, employees with children are far more likely to prefer remote because childcare has been an issue. I mean, I'll just speak candidly. I'm lucky as it could possibly be to have a partner in Erica, my wife, to co-parent. And frankly, she is the default parent. She always has. She's just hard to keep up with her. And I would just say, it's also hard to wear all these different hats as we've been trying to redo the schedule here. And so again, as I talked a little bit about, this is that divide between 55% of employees want to remote work at least 3 days a week, and executives think it should be more. There's this paradigm and this tug of war. So like if I were playing, a little bit of chess here, the idea would be, well, if everybody is asking for 3 days, maybe you should ask for 1 day or 2 days, or maybe you should stop asking for days and ask your team what they think. One of the other reasons it's not fair, and I got to tell you, this one took me a while to get here because I didn't realize this, but I'm 44. It's a big thing, apparently. I didn't realize that I was the old guy in the room in some of my circles these days. I still have it in my head that I'm 24. But when I saw this stat about Generation Z, this is a generation that just entered the workforce. And I know we all think, I do too. When I see them, I'm like, you don't have it hard. You don't know what hard is. Like hard was like working 2 full-time jobs. Hard was like working manual labor. Hard was like, I get it. But remember, hard is all relative. Generation Z is a massive opportunity for one, these are the digital natives. So they don't know what it's like not to have the internet. That's an asset, people. That's an asset. Number two, they think about things completely differently. And let me just also highlight very quickly here. Different is good because when I grew up in business 20 years ago, the way to ascend and to grow was to look at your elders, to look up, to look at the people who had left the breadcrumbs of how are we going to grow regardless, as I once said, right? That map is gone, folks. I mean, 10 years ago, we came out with companies like Airbnb, Uber, companies that were hard to conceive because we started playing with the concept of ownership, the sharing economy. Well, I will tell you, the Generation Z and millennials, they're not thinking about buying 2 houses and a boat and a car and getting to a point of retirement. Their values are starting to merge with the values in the workplace, and it's something to really address. So what's the answer? The answer is the proverbial sweet spot. You got to find what's good for the employees. This isn't a one-side equation, and the employer and the clients. And I'm going to throw a 4th bucket that we just couldn't find the right Venn for this one, is good for humanity. I asked you this in the very beginning of the workshop. If you have kids, just put in the chat how many kids you have. A lot of 2s, a lot of 3s. Look at that. So put all of your baggage aside. How do you want your kids to work one day? I didn't say we don't want them to earn it. I didn't say we don't want to teach them good principles of being a good human and learning the value of hard work. But can you honestly say you really think it's a good idea that they should go through the bullshit that you did? Or do you think we can just evolve our thinking a little bit? Like we get a chance to decide. If we learn nothing out of COVID, the entire world came together. I think it was like 200,000 scientists, Operation Warp Speed. We developed a vaccine faster than we've ever developed a vaccine before. Like we proved that we can change on a dime. We used to say change takes a long time. My ass, it does. Sometimes it can go faster and further. And this is an opportunity to do that. So this particular practice, you're going to have to go read a book to do it. So David, can you put in the chat for me, Andrew's book, Thrive? So we've been teaching this concept for a while. Some of you know what it is. A role excellence profile is a way to make it fair. It's a way to go in and study your high performers and to figure out what those folks do, and then to create a map, this composite, this role excellence profile, so that you can, kind of in your way, not what other companies do, but what drives high performance. And what I will tell you is, most organizations think this is a job description. It's not. Most people think this is like a performance review. It's not. It's not OKRs. This is what creates high performance and excellence in role. Simply put, how many Tom Brady's would you like on your team? And what does Tom think about? You may not like the guy, but the guy's done fairly well in this whole football thing, right? And so how could you deconstruct what are, again, define success, define, as you see at the very bottom here, the outputs of value, and then to really analyze what drive those things. If you pick up the book, you'll really get some good, as Jeff Lester just said, some great actionable steps in there. And I will also say around this thing to make it fair, I've had the opportunity to advise a group called 100% Human at Work. It's from Virgin Unite, Richard Branson's do-gooder entity. He's got 386 companies. One of them is called Virgin Unite. We just had a session where the woman, Hala, and I'm going to say her name wrong, Tomas Dodor, she was a prime minister candidate in Iceland. And she had this great quote. She said, do not ask yourself, who am I to do something about this? Ask yourself, who am I not to do something about this? And it was a call to arms, which is, go over to the left of this slide, practice inclusivity. Nothing about us without us. It's time to stop making decisions for people. It's time to start making decisions with people. So asking questions of like, who's at the table, who's in the room, what's at stake, how can this be good for all of us? I know this sounds like an after school special for some of us because this is the way we did not grow up. I know. This is going to turn into like a cooperative, an ESOP. Some of you are into that. You know that this whole idea of getting people to act like an owner, it just takes you to invite them into the conversation. Now, blurred lines everywhere are another reason hybrid work may not work. This is not the Robin Thicke song. This is more about the idea that we are crossing over to new paradigms of, having the ability to talk about your personal life and the workplace, having the ability to not wear the masks that we once had pre-pandemic. I mean, do you remember all the things that you wouldn't say at work? I mean, just imagine if you were an alien, you showed up on this planet and you came here and you said, okay, let me get this straight. You grow up, you go to a school that you don't really use any of that education to go get a job that you don't really love, that you stay there for decades. 70% of you while you're doing that are not engaged and would do anything else to get yourself out of that. And then finally get to a place that you're not walking as fast or thinking as fast. You're in your 60s, you retire, and then you just wait to go wherever you're going to go. I mean, what are we doing? What are we doing? I mean, we can all change this. This is a different conversation. We can decide, all of us, individually, collectively, how we want this to go. And I get for some of you, this is a triggering moment that I'm talking about, whether it's politics like Black Lives Matter or Stop Asian Hate, or, you have very deep-rooted beliefs that this is not something we should talk about at the workplace. I hear you, but that's not what the data says. So if you're a marketer, you know that whatever the data says, you should sort of follow that bouncing ball, because it's less about your opinion and it's more about the opinion of the people that you're going to be engaged or doing business with. You've got BlackRock, you've got Netflix, you've got organizations that are expecting from their employees and consumers to speak out. And look, I'm not about virtue signaling. I don't like cancel culture. There's a whole mess of this that I don't think is clean or clear, for sure. And as I was in this meeting, I'm virtue signaling right now, by the way. I was in a meeting with Richard Branson's daughter at 100% Virgin, 100% at Work initiative. And we were talking about this exact conversation. These are leaders and CHROs from literally all over the world. We were having this discussion about, how do you figure a way to make people comfortable? How do you figure a way to allow people to feel welcomed as long as they welcome everyone else is another way to consider this. And I think one of the most crazy examples of inclusivity, or the conversation of allowing people to talk about this stuff work, is BlackRock. I don't know, BlackRock, biggest private equity firm on the planet, leading the charge with ESG initiatives and talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. Like, if you knew that one of the most powerful and influential forces in the capital market was talking about this as part of their thesis for investing moving forward, go to SoftBank. SoftBank, Masayoshi-san, is investing only in companies that are technologically going to make the world a better place. Now, it's questionable about some of his investments, but again, there's at least a thesis about how do we make this good for all of us. One of my interesting most recent examples is Basecamp. I have talked about Basecamp 150,000 times. I love them. Small company, diverse, wrote 5 books on culture, all about flexibility, freedom, etc. And then they lost their ever-loving mind. Both the CEOs, the founders, happen to resemble me again, said, you know what? We're tired of our team talking about politics. No more politics at the workplace. Now, I get it. It's not always pretty to talk about politics at the workplace. You could be offending other people. You could be bringing in an element that you don't want to bring in. But I will tell you, there's got to be a way to do this, because when they did this, and I read this article and it was published in the New York Times, I was appalled, because one of the founders in the article, he called politics at the office a distraction. Oh, and I should just mention, it was less than 14 days after the George Floyd murder trial and Derek Chauvin's conviction. So this is when you want to plant your flag, after the most historic trial when it comes to police brutality in the Black community. This is where this is the hill you want to die on. I said to everyone around me incessantly for days that this was going to cost them. And in 2 weeks, a third, including executives, left that company. team, 41% of the people right now, including my company, including your company, are thinking about what's next. And it's not the only thing. It's not just social justice. We've been talking about labor policy for a very long time. Remember, this is the way we used to work. Lots of people did not fare so well when we did this. And then we got unions and regulation, and we actually did create norms that kept people safe. And we still got stuff done. But we're about to hit a new world order where it's not just people, it's these things. It's the fact that we've got this whole notion of automation is going to eat the workforce. And you don't have to like Andrew Yang. You don't have to like some of the other things that have been written about this. But Oxford, McKinsey, lots of organizations are talking about 50% of the workforce is going to be displaced. How many of you are trying to find tech talent now and you can't? Right. How many of you are trying to find high-level specialized talent that did not get that training in college? Now, even though hybrid is going to give us the chance to go select maybe a global workforce, at the end of the day, we're still dealing with the talent shortage. If that's all you get out of this today, is that there is a talent shortage coming. It is here. 70% of the companies that have been surveyed say this now. 41% of the employees that you have are thinking about something else. At the end of the day, the practice here, and I'm stealing this line from one of my shamans. That's right. A shaman's going to get a little airtime in this today. Do human better. Help people be seen, heard, valued, celebrated, appreciated, understood. This quote, success is when we see every person as a human being. We understand who they are, what their purpose and passions are, and how important their contribution is. Like, that's it. You don't have to take a side. You don't have to put out statements. This isn't about that. This is about be human better. You know, look, at the end of the day, and I mean the end of the day, when we get to the wrap up here, you know, I get hybrid work. It's scary. It's unknown territory, but there's upside. You know, you can take the deck and read this later. There's expanded talent marketing, enhanced productivity. I'm giving you some practices to think about: deep heart listening, empowering your people, prioritizing fundamental well-being, you know, live by nothing about us without us, to do human a little better. And I love this quote: bad companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive them. Great companies are improved by them. And look, we're all, as one of my partners and leaders in the organization, Jamie says this all the time. She says, we're all just walking each other home. Like, we all know the end destination here. And if some of you know me, I've got a little bit of a fascination with death. I think it's single greatest thing we don't talk enough about. Some of you were at the conference that I put on in November 19th. November of 19, we put on a conference about mortality because I was like, why are we not talking about this thing? If you're into the Stoic philosophy, or Ryan Holiday, this is a nice little blog post from him, which is this coin that he created called Memento Mori, that we can go at any moment. He designed it with these three little symbols: the symbol of death, the skull, the symbol of life, the plant, and then next to it, the symbol of time, you know, which is interesting that we all know that we get a period of time here. And if we all start to just really click in that we're not going to be here long, and if we're not going to be here long, we all know how this goes. At the end of life, we're not going to say, we wish we'd have made more money, worked more. You're not taking anything with you. We're going to talk about, how do you want to be remembered? You know, how did you live? What did you stand for? Who did you stand with? What brought you joy? You know, and as you get this deck, I would really strongly encourage you to click into these questions, because this can really help change your point of view and your perspective. So, a little hotter than I thought it was going to be in here, because I was speaking a little faster than I thought, Nestor. It's okay. So, what's the answer? How can we help you? I told you this time last year, our team got the idea that instead of trying to make money from the pandemic, that we were going to be of service and support. Some of you took us up on this offer. We decided to stop charging people for surveys. It was a little crazy at the time. We weren't exactly like flush with cash or crazy amounts of business opportunity, but we thought, hey, when I look back on this pandemic and this crisis, I want to be proud. I want my kids to be proud of the way that we leaned in as an organization. So we took 45 companies, tens of thousands of employees, and we got their voices heard. They had a vote in what was next. Now, look, I get it. Some of you are back to the office in some ways. Some of you are clear on what hybrid work looks like, but I'm asking you a different question, which is, what is your post-pandemic strategy? What is it? Do you have a clue? It will be over. And when it is, do you have a post-pandemic strategy? And specifically a post-pandemic work strategy. So part of what we're going to invite you to do is, if you click on the link below, and David, you can put it in the chat as you just did. If you're under 35 companies or under 35 employees, we'll actually do this pro bono. Because it's a new year and we got to update our thinking. If you're more than 35 employees, we're going to charge you a small nominal fee, depending on the size of organization. But the bottom line is we're going to help co-create a survey, a listening system, a real deep listening exercise with your organization. We're going to ask questions that are specific to you and your group. We're going to help you design what your post-pandemic work strategy should be. Now, again, you may have a hybrid one, but do you have a post-pandemic work strategy? Maybe yes, maybe no, but we would love to help you. Finally, as I got you here, there are a few resources that if you've not clicked into, I'll start from right to left. Inevitable Future of Work, Jeff Lesher on the Shift team has done a remarkable job of curating some great guests. The last one I thought that I really enjoyed was by this woman, Carol Robin, who I mentioned to you before. She wrote this book, Connect, and they talked about this idea of like, how do you really authentically relate to people? And in this environment, I can't think of a better type of conversation to plug into. Second, Thrive. I am so excited about this book. Andrew Friedman, my friend and partner of 20 years in this business, put together his life's work into this manifesto, Thrive. If you've not clicked on it, it is one of the best books I've ever read around high performance and real clarity, and really was dialed into this moment. So if that had some interest to you, I would click on that book. And Andrew has been also kind of dipping into some companies, doing some fireside chats. So if you got some interest in that. And then finally, an oldie but a goodie. It's not that old anymore. Shift the Work, still around, still relevant. Talks a little bit about the head, the heart, and the gut, and the engagement piece. But in that book, there's 27 exercises that we all co-created at Shift that we put in there. And we really wanted to make a useful manual. So you'll notice everything we talk about here at Shift is about application, about integration, and frankly, at the end of the day, integrity. And I don't mean like the integrity that we're all more noble than each other. I mean the integrity of like what's inside of you. Whatever I've said today, I hope that a few of these things have resonated. I just would say to you, from one human to another, this is a moment not to waste. We're all going to be here a short stint. And I know this sounds a little somber on a Wednesday, but it is Shift. So just get through it. There's a way to really walk through this pandemic and this crisis and this moment in a totally different way than maybe you're even doing today. And I'm not saying what you're doing is bad. None of us are doing anything wrong or bad, but maybe we can do it better. And in our mind, better together. So first and foremost, I want to thank our team at Shift, who are remarkable human beings who pull off some of the best content creation in the game. Our marketing team at Falcon, who's been helping us put together all the details and the tactics. For you, if you're joining and listening to this, I know a lot of you and I love a lot of you, and you have always shown up for me. And I'm so incredibly grateful and appreciative that I've gotten a chance to orbit you. For some of the folks I don't know that well, cool. If you guys want to get to know each other a little bit more, throw your emails in the chat. And if you want to hang out with us, we'd love to hang out with you. So with all that said, we will be doing more hybrid work series where we're going to be pulling in some experts to talk about some of these things. And if you've got some feedback for us to make this session better or any other questions, let us know. And we would love to be of service. So with that, I will be signing off here. I hope that you guys have an amazing Wednesday. It's family game night at the McClinsky house. This is a night that we all lean in and do a little family game night. So hopefully you'll get a chance to do that with your family as well. And I will see you all soon. Peace and love.